Hello, and welcome to Vision New England's Church in Action podcast. Here we talk with New England leaders about critical issues that impact how Christians engage in our culture to accelerate evangelism.
Hi, on behalf of Vision New England, I'd like to welcome you to the Church in Action podcast. I am Heidi Joy. I am co-director of Breathe Ministry. Breathe is all about helping pastoral couples live whole and thriving lives. The well-being of pastoral couples is so important and has such an impact on the local church and the movement of the kingdom of God. While pastoral couples get to be part of the amazing spiritual transformation of members of their churches, they also walk alongside them in the deep trenches of hurt and brokenness. And while that is just such a burden to pastors, and they want to share that also can cause stress in their life, in their church relationships, and also in their marriage relationships. It takes great humility, faith, endurance, perseverance, and just working towards having a thriving relationship in their marriage so that they can have a thriving ministry. I am so happy today that we get to look at the life of a pastor's wife, because the pastor's wife is such an important person. And we hope today that you're going to get better understanding of what her life is like, and hopefully that will prompt you to be her champion. And if you are a pastor's wife today and you're listening, we hope you feel valued, supported, and we hope that you realize that you are not alone, that you have fellow sojourners with you. So today I want to introduce our two guests who are women of great faith, who love the local church, who love Jesus Christ, who love their family, and who love their husbands, who are, yes, pastors. That makes them pastors' wives. So welcome Chrissy Kendrick from Vox Church and Sonia Bailey from the First Cathedral. Both churches are in Connecticut. Welcome, ladies.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I was thinking to start out, it probably would be really helpful for people that are not from Connecticut or who aren't familiar with their churches, just to give them a snapshot of your church and what your husband's position is and how you fit into the church. Do you work for the church? Do you minister in the church? So who would like to go first?
Go ahead, Sonia, take it away.
Well, thank you. Hi, everybody. I am Sonia Bailey, and I am from the First Cathedral in Bloomfield, Connecticut. The First Cathedral has been in existence for going on 53 years this year, and it's a church of a couple thousand members. It's grown, obviously, in those 53 years from a few people to quite a few many people. And my husband is the co-pastor. He's been in that role since 2016. And I work to support him. I do not work full-time at the church, but I do participate in various ministries. Two of the ministries that I lead are God's Girls and Daughters of Esther, both of which serve our young ladies at the First Cathedral.
Thanks, Sonia. Chrissy.
Yeah, so my husband, Justin, and I are ministers at Vox Church. So we started the church about 10 years ago with a group of our very, very close friends. So we're babies compared to the work that God's doing over there at First Cathedral. And so it has been just a crazy journey for us. So Justin is the lead pastor here. I work part-time. I lead worship, and I also help lead our women's ministry here. And so I work part-time and then some more. Sonia, I know you know about that too, right? So yeah, so it's been an incredible journey these last 10 years, just watching God grow from starting in our living room with some of our closest friends to being at this place now where we have 9 campuses that spread across Connecticut. And we just launched 2 campuses in Massachusetts over the last year and a half. So it's been a really exciting journey.
That is exciting. So just can you also fill us in? Do you have kids? What's your family makeup?
I have one daughter. She's 2 years old. Her name is Ava Joy. And I have my husband.
Awesome. Chrissy?
Yeah, we got a few. So we have Gabriel is 14, Noah is almost 12, Ezra is 7, and our daughter Thea is almost 2. So got a lot going on. It's a busy house.
Yeah, definitely. It's so great to hear the stories of your two churches that are both different, but they're unique, and God has his hand on them. And I think that so reflects pastors' wives. We're all different. We're all unique. God has used different experiences in our lives, from the family he put us in to our schooling to just different things that have happened in our lives that brought us to this point. And it so helps when church communities take the time to get to know their pastor's wife's story and let her be the woman who God created her to be, because that just makes the church flow better, and it makes just family life and ministry life go so much better. So I would like to take the time for you two to be able to just take maybe 10 minutes each and share some of your story with us, from childhood to now in 10 minutes. You can do it. You can have a little bit longer if you need, but just to help us, help all of us just get a little bit of understanding about you and where you come from.
Okay.
Sonia, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, like I said, I am Sonia Bailey, and I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. As an only child, I was raised by my mom and dad in an Episcopalian church, church that my parents were a part of since before I was born. And I went off to Gordon College, and there I met my husband, Michael, and we got married 2 years after graduation, and we moved to Connecticut, and he has been in full-time ministry since we've been married in various capacities as a youth pastor, and then in 2016 he became the co-pastor. And I would say that when I joined this great First Cathedral, I had a lot of insecurity and intimidation, because the First Cathedral is not an Episcopalian church, kind of on the other spectrum of what I was used to. And I joined this great preaching family, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my husband, all great preachers in their own right. And I felt like, me? What do I have to add to the conversation? And I really shied away from a lot of ministry opportunities. I just really did not feel confident in how I can add my gifts to the church. But in 2016, my husband was elevated to the co-pastor, and I would say that elevation really kind of spurred a series of events. Soon after that, we lost our baby after living for just 20 minutes. And 3 months after that, my dad passed away. A few months after that, I had a very bad accident at home where my face got very severely burned. I was temporarily blinded for a couple of weeks. And it was just so many instances, so many things back to back to back to back. And in that time, I really found my voice. I feel like it really gave me the confidence to realize that I don't have to be like anybody else. My story is my story, and my relationship with God is my relationship.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like my mother-in-law or this other person. I'm me. And that's valuable. And there are people in this world who are like me, who are not the extrovert, who are not the outspoken one, who are a little bit more shy. And my ministry, I believe, is for those ladies who aren't naturally extroverted, because that's not me. But I do believe that all of those events coupled together, I know we all know that scripture that all things work together for the good. And I think that that's exactly what happened. All those things work together to birth this confidence, this fire, this belief that if I could get through those dark, very, very dark times, I mean, what can I do now?
Wow.
And it's led me to be on a podcast, which is something I would never dream of doing ever, 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 ever. I would be way too scared, way too shy. I would probably back out at the last minute, but here I am.
And we are so glad you are here. You know, Sonia, thank you for sharing the heartache in your life. And that is, I can't imagine going through all of that, any of those things in that short of time, but just, you know, losing your child would just be so difficult. And to be a pastor's wife and in the public eye with that going on, that just seems like it would be probably a blessing, but also really difficult. So thank you for sharing.
Me too.
Chrissy, you want to share some of your story?
Yeah, I'd love to. And, you know, I love how, and just the beauty of the body of Christ, you know, and Heidi, you and I were talking about this when we did our like intro conversation and talked about what we would be discussing today. And I'm so grateful, Sonia, to just even hear a little bit. Obviously, right, we know that's just like a snapshot of what God has walked you through and what you've gleaned from that. And so I just am so thankful that we get to be on this call together today, two different women with different experiences, but our hearts get to be connected with this commonality of like loving the church and loving Jesus. So just thanks for sharing that. I know like being vulnerable is hard, right? And like sharing big things and like big life moments is difficult. So I am not shy. I do not have a hard time talking, or, you know, that is, I was born talking and I have not stopped for 38 years. So, you know, I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a pastor's home. My mom and dad planted a church when I was 10 here in Connecticut. And so I grew up in ministry. I grew up with a mom and a dad who did it right in our home. They loved my brother and I really, really well. And, you know, I was not one of those PKs that grew up and was like, I hate the church, I hate ministry, not for me. I did, however, think like, leading a church, that's not for me. I'll do like other things because I could be more productive for the kingdom or more this or more that. And so Justin and I actually traveled for about 10 years with some of our close friends doing music ministry all up and down the East Coast. We did a bunch of stuff in Europe, some missions work, and we felt like this is the path that God has for us. This is our journey in ministry. And you know, about 10 years in, we really had this like just this stirring in our heart where we were discontent with what we were doing. We were not super plugged into a local church. We were not really invested in the community that we were a part of. And all of us on our team just felt this like growing discontent. And Justin came to us one day and was like, I think we're supposed to plant a church. And we were like, okay, that seems right. And, you know, I lived with this like, I think fear and apprehension as a kid, just watching the weight of the spotlight that my parents carried and like the weight in their church that they had started and that I grew up in was not a very large church, but even still there is that weight that you carry of being seen and being so visible. And I thought like, that's no thanks, that's not for me. And then here we are, right? We find ourselves in this place, like knowing like, all right, Lord, this is what you have for us. We want to believe God for a greater move in his church in New England. We want to partner with the work that's happening here. And so, you know, we went from meeting with a group of like our closest friends in our home to having like a Bible study in our home every week. We're inviting people in to meeting once a month as a church, and then still meeting in our home. And so this group in our home kind of took on this life of its own. And that's really what our church looked like for a while until we started meeting weekly. And so the relational dynamic there, I feel like I have experienced a lot of ups and downs in that over the last 10 years, where you start with a super close, intimate group where everybody knows the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And there's a beauty there. And then you move from layer to layer and you become less known, but people still think they know you and they can make assumptions about you because even there's only a few degrees of separation, right? And so that, I think for me, I struggled with that early on, and I struggled with feeling like, okay, I know how to do intentional community really well. I know how to let my heart be open to my closest friends and love Jesus and lean into one another. And then that group becomes 50, and that group becomes 200, and that group becomes 2,000, right? And so just for me personally, wrestling through like, how do I maintain confidence in my calling and not allow gosh, this sounds cheesy, but the spotlight to be that secure place for me, right? Like if I'm seen, that means I'm valuable. Or if I do something that our church deems productive, that means I'm pleasing the Lord. And I had to really wrestle through just a lot of identity stuff, like probably midway through the last 10 years. So probably about 5 years ago, I hit kind of a wall and feeling like I had allowed other people's expectations to do something in me that detracted from my calling, and that really robbed me of the beauty of church life, the beauty of community, the beauty of the position that I get to hold in our church. And that's not other people's fault, right? Like it's up to me what I do with other people's expectations, right? And so I feel like I had to really wrestle through just really going back to the roots of my identity in Jesus, and like, I love being a pastor's wife. I love our church. I love the work that God is doing in New England, and really wrestling through like, okay, how do I create this beautiful marriage of my love for the church, my love for his work here, my love for my husband and supporting his calling and honoring my family, and also honoring what I feel like the Lord has put in me and allowing those things to be an offering to the Lord, right? Instead of where I find my identity, And so, allowing Jesus to be sufficient and enough for me and not like other people's opinions, because it's scary, right, Sonia? Like, I'm sure like you have felt so many times too of like, I love that I get to allow my life to be an example, but I'm really regular and I'm really normal. And I have stuff that I'm walking through that is embarrassing or that's hard, or I'm going to say things that are dumb. And then I have to apologize because like I'm super normal and regular. And I think I allowed that to be a real like place of fear for a long time in the early church years for us, where I just was afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, leading somebody astray. And there is an honor to that part of our calling, right? Where like, I am responsible for people, and that I don't hold lightly. I'm so humbled that I get to play that role, that I get the gift of leading people to Jesus with my life, with my words. But I also like that job belongs to the Holy Spirit too, first, before it belongs to me, and like juggling that, I think has been an interesting journey for me to flesh out. And yeah, so that's kind of been like my whirlwind of a like, I love this, I don't love this, this is fun, this is not. And I'm sure like Sonia, you have felt that too, right? There are moments of this journey as a pastor's wife and being in the spotlight in ministry that is so fun and so incredible. And then there are times that are hard, right? And that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and close my door now. Bye. Yeah, so that's kind of my chaotic story.
That was great. That was awesome. And I think just thank you for being, both of you, thank you for being real. Thank you for being authentic. And I think those expectations, we all, in all of our relationships, expectations always play a part. And a lot of them are never even spoken. And I remember an early conference that I went to when my husband and I first planted our church, and the pastor's wife said, you cannot meet everyone's expectations, and you're not even going to know what their expectations are. So just, ask the Father, ask God what he expects of you and live that out. I think I used that to a fault and thought, I was like that, I just have to live to God's expectations and don't have to be worried about what other people think, but we have to be sensitive. So for any of the people that were part of our church early on, I'm sorry, I apologize. But but those expectations, living for the Father, and how he's created us to be, is the first expectation that we have to live to. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. So, So maybe going from Chrissy, from when you were the small church to the large church, I think you gave a really good feel for that. Sonia, and you talked a little bit about, getting into your stride. Just, can either of you go to being a young woman? You're both young. But being even younger, like Sonia, I'm thinking of you coming right out of probably college and seminary into this huge church. What would be your best advice to a pastor's wife who's young and coming out and coming into a situation to just how do you handle that? And what are things to be aware of?
Well, I would like to preface by saying this is non-expert advice, but it's just my opinion. I am very blessed that my mother-in-law she's a wonderful example. My father-in-law has been pastoring this church for 50 years, and that is great, but it's also daunting because we are walking behind people who have been leading for 50 years, but not just leading, but doing it well, which is an extra added burden. But I would say my biggest takeaway from what I've been through is being in ministry is not a highlight reel. It's not just putting your accomplishments, your wins, your successes, but it's being real. Sometimes I'm here, but sometimes I'm here. And that's just the way it is. I would say that when my son died, at his funeral, we had so many people come up to us and say, I went through the same thing and I never told anybody. I've been carrying this burden for 15 years, for 20 years. But the fact that we were in a church with a little small casket in front of us, grieving publicly, gave people the confidence to open that wound that they had within themselves. And we all know that, a scab or a cut, it needs air, it needs light, it doesn't heal in the dark. And sometimes you just have to take the Band-Aid off and say, I can't just want people to support me when I'm riding high. I have to allow them the space to support me when things are not going so well too. And there's no shame in that. And sometimes I feel like, the devil operates in shame and he makes you think if you're low, something wrong with you. You're failing. You're not as called as you thought you were. You're not as anointed as you thought you were because you wouldn't be going through this low period. And that's not true. That's a lie.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's so true. That's so true. So, Sonia, your experience was very public then. And would you say to a pastor's wife, if she's got something going on inside and it's not public yet, how would you reach out for help?
I would say that everything doesn't have to be shared. Like there is a balance, and sometimes finding that balance is almost impossible because we're wives. Just because we're a pastor's wife doesn't mean we're married to a perfect husband. Like our husbands are men and they do things that we don't like. We argue, and I don't have to broadcast, my husband for the 50th time, he left his shoes where I told him not to. Like, that doesn't need to be shared. But I think if you are spending time in prayer and with the Holy Spirit, he will show you what should be shared and what shouldn't be shared. And I think you could probably attest to this too, Chrissy, that you have this burning, this inkling in your spirit that lets you know, like, this is something that is going to be beneficial to other women. And I found in my own life, when I don't follow that, it's always come around where I'm like, I should have. Yeah. So I've learned to just, when I get that feeling, here it is.
Yeah. And I think off of that, Sonia, I would agree with that so much, because I think, don't you find that like sometimes you speak yourself into your own healing or into your own freedom or into your own redemption. And so sometimes I have found that's one of the greatest gifts that I think about being in the position that I am in, that there are situations where I'll choose vulnerability, or I'll choose to share something publicly that is painful or that is hard. And the Lord releases this new level of freedom in my own life, in my obedience to share that, like, because it's not my victory, it's the Lord's victory that he's already won for me. It's not my healing, it's the Lord's healing that he's made available to me. And so the beauty and the power in sharing my story when it's right when it's necessary, and that unlocks freedom for somebody else too. And it's like, that is, I think, one of the greatest gifts of being on a platform or being in a public position, is that I get to be a part of other people's stories and other people's healings just by saying, well, I can offer what the Lord has done in me, right? Like, that's all I have to give, is like, I have my story and the truth that God has made evident in my own life, in my redemption story, you know? And so you're right in that, knowing that like burning happens and you're like, okay, I have to share, like I have to be open. And what a gift to other women and to other people in our church to get to take part in that collective freedom together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So how about friendships? You two both belong to large churches, and your life is much more public in some ways. But friendships, I've talked to a lot of pastors' wives who just say it's just so hard to develop close friendships within the church community, to feel like I could trust somebody, that's not going to, my life is not going to be gossiped about if I share something.
Yeah.
You know, talk about your close friendships, and maybe how you create them, or how you find people to be friends with.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, this is another case of letting the Holy Spirit lead you, because I think cultivating friendships when you have a perceived authority can be difficult. It's like being friends with your boss.
Yeah.
Like, it works when things are going well,
Yeah.
but when things are not going well, that's where you get into the stickiness. And I have found that when I have just asked God to lead people into it, well, allow people to come into my life that have good intentions, that their only intention is just to be a friend. It's not to get closer to the spotlight. It's not to, find out about the inner workings of the church, because for some reason people think that's fascinating, that there's some hocus pocus going on behind the scenes that they want to find out about. When I just rely on the Lord to, make a way for the friendship door to open, those seem to be the relationships that are mutually beneficial, that I'm able to be a good friend to someone else and they are able to do the same for me.
Yeah.
Chrissy?
I agree with that. And I think too, something that I've had to really embrace and learn is that, like, it takes work, right? Like, relationships are hard. Marriage takes work. Raising my kids and having a close relationship with my kids takes work. Like, our relationship with Jesus takes work. Every relationship that we have requires mutual work and mutual care. And I think that, we have had the incredible gift of doing life with friends for, 20 years. Some people that we're still at our part of our church now, that, like, when we were kids, we started traveling together. And so really there is like this select few that have really stayed, and our relationships have taken different forms because there was this like super equal playing field, and now we're like leading a church. And so we had to kind of figure out, okay, well, now what does this relationship look like? And then it evens back out. And then, so there's like this ebb and flow too, that I think is okay. And I think I struggled for years with feeling like, I needed more connection, or I'm very social, I'm very relationally driven. And so I went from feeling like I had this larger group of friends to where now, this is such a cheesy thing, but I, like, in my mind, this is how I refer to them. I've never said this publicly, so you're welcome. I have like my safe squad. I have these few women. There's not 10 of them. There's not 8 of them. There's like 3 of them that I know, if it is the middle of the night, or if it is the middle of a church service, or if whatever is happening, the good and the bad, that they're there for me. And they know the same, that I'm there for them. And there's a couple of those women that are in our church. And then I have probably 2 other very, very close relationships that are not a part of our community. And that has been incredibly life-giving for me as well, to be seen and known beyond the role that I play here in our church. And so I think that for a long time, I felt the loneliness that people say comes with ministry. And I think that that's a really unfortunate lie that too many women have just accepted, that the position of a pastor's wife is lonely. And it doesn't have to be. That's the reality, is that it just doesn't have to be. And there are certainly seasons where it's going to feel that way, but I'm responsible for that part of my life. And like, I hated that for a little while. And I thought, well, gosh, why is that any different than other people? Like, if I want a close relationship with somebody, I'm going to pursue the close relationship rather than just feeling like somebody has to pursue me. Like, how selfish is that, right? Like, if I want to know Jesus more, I have to pursue his heart. If I want closeness with my husband, if I want to grow and build in our marriage, I should pursue that. And like in friendship, it shouldn't be different. And I think that that is a lie that, and an unfortunate thing that an older generation has accepted, right? And like, Heidi, I don't know what your experience was with this, right? But I think that there is like a generational thing that, like, I watched this play out in my parents' generation, that like, they're like, well, we have each other and that's enough. And their marriage is wonderful and that's beautiful. But it's not always enough, right? Like, we are wired to need relationship and community, and even more so in a position of leadership. That's our safeguard. That is where people get to call me out and offer as like protectors, so I don't step into some nasty stuff, right? Like, I need people to say like, your attitude was really bad and like, you should repent, right? Like, I need people to tell me that, and I'm not above that or beyond that. Like, I need accountability and community just like the next woman. And so I think my biggest takeaway in relationship is like, I'm responsible to cultivate that. It's not others' responsibility to come and find me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true. Yeah, in my generation, so I'm 61, and we planted the church, and we did it a little bit differently for the time period. So we weren't the typical church, and we were not planning on being the pastor, and I wasn't planning on working for the church. And I was just planning on serving like we always do. But God had a different idea. So we weren't set up to be pastor's wife. So we approached it probably a little bit differently. Our first phone call after we had our first public service, someone called and said, "Is the pastor in?" And I said, "Excuse me?" They said, "Is the pastor in?" I'm like, "Excuse me?" They said, "Is this Heidi?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, isn't your husband a pastor?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess he is." But anyway, that goes with the whole story. But I think having friends for anybody, yes, we need friends. Women were wired to have friends, women friends, and men are wired to have men friends. And that if that's so important. And I usually stress that a ton when we do marriage counseling, is that you need your girlfriends and your husband needs his guy friends. And your marriage will be better if you make sure your husband's getting out with guys and you're getting out with girls. That's so important. I think sometimes though, especially in small churches, where so many women, I think, feel like they can be friends with the pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. It's not possible to have a ton of friends. I love your what was it? God Squad? Was it Girl Squad?
Safe
Squad. Yes. To have a safe squad is so important, whether it's some people inside the church or outside the church. Yes. And coming with age and living in the same place almost my entire life. I've noticed that also that relationships have seasons, just like your marriage has seasons. Sometimes your marriage, you're going, like you and your husband are just going right in line with each other. And then, it's starting to, spread a little bit, and you have to work to be on the same page and move in the same direction and have really good conversation. And, you have to work at love. And just that's the same with girlfriend relationships. They go in seasons, and sometimes life situations, you start to drift a little bit, but that there are those seasons with friendships where that's okay. You just have to give each other space for that. And my best friends have come back around, and my safe squad, I call them up, and I've got 2 friends from Jersey, and actually my safe squad is all moved away, but we still love the Zoom, and you can just call and ask, "Can you guys pray for me? I've got this going on in my life." And we just, text each other, and it's awesome. And I totally agree with you have to take responsibility. So, and I'm talking a lot, so I'm sorry. Can you address either, or maybe Chrissy on this, just at, have you, or no, both of you can address this. When you've had tough relationships in church, maybe some fallout.
Never happened.
Never.
It's never happened.
Yeah. So just maybe, because it happens in every church, people, we are human, we are
Yeah.
sinners. You know, how do you deal with fallout and maybe losing a really good friend who said, I'm no longer, feel like this is a church for me, I'm going someplace else, or doesn't even say it and just leaves.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
Well, I would say that those situations can be together, or it can happen that it's somebody who's part of your church who decides that they want to leave. And I think you have to learn to not take that personally, that sometimes people are called to go somewhere else, or some people are of their own free will. We're not, cultivating robots that just follow, go wherever you say to go, and they are free to go. And I think you have to have a maturity to say that I'm not going to take it personally. I'm still going to show love to that person. But also on the flip side, I can think of a situation that I hold as one of my regrets of getting into a verbal altercation with a former friend in the church, and things ended not well. And I think I just had to say, you know what, that was not a shining moment for me, and I was wrong, and I had to ask the Lord for forgiveness first of all, and realize in myself that I have this thing that's like, it's one and done. If you make me mad, I'm done with you. And that's not Christ-like.
Yeah.
And it's a fault, and I'm currently working through it, but it's hard to turn the other cheek. I mean, that scripture is not in there for nothing, because it's hard to live that out.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when it comes to, people leaving, like we have said early on, like, I want to champion any person in my life and every person in my church that is genuinely believing they're following the leading of the Lord. And like, whether I agree or not, I don't have to agree with what somebody says they feel the Lord is saying. And there are certain times, right, where it is proper and it is good to like ask questions and to speak up and to necessarily challenge somebody leaving, to like, I want to care for people well and I want to love them well. But ultimately, like, if God is moving somebody on, I want to honor that and I bless that and I champion your pursuit of what the Lord has for you. When it comes out of a place of conflict, it's just hard. It's just hard. And I think that we have had situations where people leave the church and there has been close friendship and there is not peace when they leave. And that's really painful. It's incredibly painful, especially I think because as a leader, you feel more responsible, right? And you feel like, well, I had a responsibility to keep peace with you. I have a responsibility before the Lord for there to be harmony in our relationship. And so I think that there is a degree of mourning that has to happen when those relationships do break down, or there is that painful separation, that it's okay to mourn the loss of the relationship. It's okay to mourn the loss of a friendship, or of somebody leaving and moving on. And I think I have had to learn, and am still learning, to be very quick to examine my own heart before I examine somebody else's. And all I can do is honor the Lord with my words, with the condition of my heart, to do my best to live at peace with someone and to live in harmony and to operate in forgiveness, right? And to say sorry when I'm wrong. But sometimes people are going to go and it's not going to be good, right? And there's going to be that conflict and that rubbing. And I think that I had this very naive assumption that like, we're going to do community so well, people aren't going to go. We work hard at conflict. We're not afraid of confrontation, and it's going to be great. And here we are 10 years in, and there has been a lot of conflict and a whole lot of confrontation and a lot of tears and a lot of pain, but a lot of growth that comes alongside of it. And I think that to not be afraid of the conversations, but also to be very quick to examine your own heart before the Lord, and like, how do I love my brother and my sister well? And allow that to be the launch pad for how I interact with people in relationships,
Yeah, because we're all part of the kingdom.
Yeah.
That was really great. Thank you for being honest with that. How about with church relationships, with staff relationships? Sonia, you don't work for the church, but you still have, I'm sure you still interface with some staff who's probably a lot of family. That has its own dynamic. But then Christy, too, you probably have a large staff that you are working for the church part-time, that you're interacting. Is the church staff always just the best? And there's no relational discord, is there?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. We've got around 50 people on staff. And again, we are 9 campuses. And so we have central staff, and then we have campus specific staff, but we're together a lot, and it's not always easy, right? And like doing the work of the Lord together, we are all on a continual pursuit of becoming more like Jesus every day. And that's messy, and it's going to spill over onto others. And when you work so closely with people, there's going to be times where you butt heads. But one of our values that we work hard to embody as a church, but first and foremost as a staff, is that our relationships build muscle. And so whether it is the person that you report to, or the person that you share an office with, or somebody that you don't work directly with, but you're in the same building, I am going to work hard to honor you, to hear you, to see you, to champion you and what the Lord is doing in your life. And confrontation does not have to end in you or me quitting our jobs. Which there has been situations where we're in a room, we're working through and fleshing out an issue, and somebody has said well, I'd like to tender my resignation. And it's like, okay, because we disagree, can we walk this back a little bit, and let's be okay with disagreeing a little bit here, and how do we honor each other? And I'm thinking of one specific instance, and there has been peace, and we have made amends, and it was hard and painful and a little awkward when you pass in the hallway a couple times, right, for the first couple days after a confrontation. But then you realize I love you because I love Jesus, and you love me because you love Jesus, and that's what makes this work, right? If we take recognizing each other's humanity out of the equation, it's going to explode and be real nasty. So yeah, just knowing that it takes hard work, and we're going to be intentional to work hard at loving each other well in our staff. So
yeah, I have limited interaction, I think, with the staff, but something that you said just prompted me to think about this phrase that I try to live by, that we can disagree agreeably. That because it's a disagreement doesn't mean it has to be ugly and nasty. And sometimes, a disagreement is just a difference of opinion. You like chocolate, I like vanilla. It could be simple as that.
Sure.
But working at the church, it can have unrealistic expectations. I think you have to position things realistically, that just because we're working at the church and this is ministry doesn't mean that all of a sudden people are just enlightened and they're going to operate on this higher plane. It's human beings, and sometimes even us, we operate in a way that is not godly, if we want to be honest, and we have to give people the leeway to make mistakes, just like we want that same freedom. And you speak to people respectfully and things can be worked out. A disagreement doesn't mean an end of a relationship. It's just a disagreement.
Yes. So would you say that you would welcome people if, you've hurt someone? Please come and talk to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't feel threatened by the position of the woman being the pastor's wife. We're all human, and we want to make relationships right. We want to be right with people within our church communities and within staff, and we want to be loving, but we're imperfect. We are imperfect human beings, just like everybody else, but we love Jesus and we want to love others. Thanks for sharing on those. How about what do you do as a woman, especially with being a pastor's wife and having family? What do you do to help keep yourself, give you life? What gives you life?
So I would say I am an introvert, which is my husband's an extreme extrovert, and I would say I'm almost an extreme introvert. And sometimes I just want to be by myself. I don't want you to talk to me. I don't want you to ask me questions. I want to be by myself. And being alone doesn't mean lonely. It just means I'm by myself. And I like to read. I like to do things alone. And that can be recharging. I know for my husband, sometimes that's hard for him to fathom. Like, you want to be alone? Yes, I do. Like, go away. But, that's just me. That me time is what gets me centered. I work things out on my own in my own head. And I need that time to just, be me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think for me, it's taken different shapes over the years. And I find that, so I'm very extroverted. I'm very social. You've gathered that over the last 40 minutes. But as I have gotten older, honestly, I have grown to really love and need more time alone and by myself. Time alone with the Lord, certainly, but then also time alone to take a bath and read a book where nobody needs me, or where my 2-year-old's not coming to the bathroom with me, or I'm not answering emails, or where I can just take time and paint my nails and tint my eyebrows, or whatever it is that makes me feel centered and at peace. And I think for me, Justin and I have worked really hard, and we revisit every 3 or 4 months, how are your personal rhythms? Are you exercising? Do you feel like you're eating well? Are you getting adequate time with your friends? Do you feel like we have adequate time as a couple? How is our date night rhythm? Things like that. And so taking inventory every few months, I think, has been something that over the last couple of years we've implemented. In the beginning, it was kind of just a free for all of catch up, and everything was an afterthought of, oh gosh, we're burnt out. Maybe we should reevaluate. And so we have tried and are, still a work in progress, excuse me. But to just every couple of months say, check in, look at our calendars. I keep a on paper day planner, which is cumbersome, but I plan out even my days that I'm not in the office. This hour is what I'm doing here. I'm going to the gym. I'm folding. Because for me, I can be a little bit if I don't plan it, I'll spend an hour on my phone and then feel exhausted. Do you know what I mean? And so, just taking time to make sure I'm exercising and taking a bath once a week with my children.
Vox Church, you have a very clean pastor's wife.
Yeah, I know. I believe more than once a week, to be clear. That was not take a bath only once a week.
Oh my. So, within that, how about talking about your relationship with your husband, and that's what you do for yourself. How about date? Chrissy, you mentioned date night.
Mm-hmm.
How do you encourage one another and keep the romance alive?
Yeah. So Justin and I, we're 38. We've been together since we were 16. So we will celebrate almost 17 years of marriage this June, which is wonderful. And genuinely, I like him more than ever, and I certainly love him more than ever. And our marriage has taken work like any other marriage does, and has had its ups and downs. But one thing that I will give 100% credit to my husband for is that he is just very, very good at pursuing the growth of our relationship. And so we have a date night once a week, and we don't go out once a week, not with 4 kids. But once a week, our kids know, you guys can go watch a movie downstairs. It's mom and dad are going to hang out, and we'll have have dinner by ourselves. Like I'll wait and I'll cook a meal just for the two of us or whatever. And then usually once a month, we'll go out somewhere. We'll go out to a restaurant. And once a year we go to Mexico, and I'm leaving in 3 days. Praise Jesus. So yeah, and we take like 5 or 6 days once a year, just us, where we kind of pull away. But yeah, making time for each other. There's no replacement than just that time and intentional investment.
That's awesome. Mexico sounds awesome too. I want to go.
I know.
Sonia, how about you? You've got a little 2-year-old at home, and
Yes, I would say this is an area that I don't want to say we struggle in, but like you mentioned, Chrissy, it takes work and intentionality. If you don't plan to spend time together, it doesn't just happen, boom, we're together. Like you have to plan for it. But I think one thing that I've really tried to be intentional about, I know it's only January, 29th, 28th, so, haven't been at it that long, but really finding things to appreciate my husband for, because sometimes it's easy to point out those things that get on your nerves, those things that you're like, ugh, but really appreciating him. Like he's funny, he's quick on his feet, he's goofy, just making a point to say, babe, what you did, that was so funny, or thank you so much for this. And I think that feeds him, and that in turn opens the door for him to be more, receptive. If I want to say something that maybe isn't as pleasant, that you've already been filled with those compliments, and genuine compliments, not just because I want something, oh, you got a great shirt, but I really mean what I'm saying. And, finding the way to love your spouse the way they need to be loved, not the way you think they need to be loved. I think that for me has been the biggest road to just strengthening our marriage, that loving my husband the way that he wants and needs to be loved.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's great. We have a question about what encouragement do you give yourself when it becomes overwhelming as a pastor's wife? I think you guys have kind of hit upon it, but do you want to just address that question?
Yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, and I made sure I had my Bible open because I was wondering if somebody's going to ask this question. I was reading this morning in 2 Corinthians, and I read this verse today, and I've read it a countless number of times, but I felt like today the Lord was like, this is your lifeline, and this is the lifeline for so many women. So in 2 Corinthians 3, not that we're sufficient in ourselves to claim anything is coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God. There could be nothing else written in this book, and that would be just about enough, right? Like, I am not enough in myself. I'm not. My giftings, my talents, the things that I am naturally good at, they're not enough, and they were never meant to be enough. I have been created to need Jesus and for him to be my everything. And so if I am feeling burnt out or overwhelmed or frustrated, or the list could go on, right? The variety of feelings that we can sometimes feel because of the onslaught of people in ministry or because of the weight that we carry in ministry. If Jesus is enough for me, I have the capacity to walk through anything else. If he is the one that is right in front of me, and that is my sole pursuit is of his heart, and allowing him to remain and making sure he's king on the throne of my heart, like that's it. And everything else, in a sense, just kind of takes care of itself, right? When that's our posture and our prime pursuit. So
yeah, I agree with that. I think recognizing your shortcomings and your flaws it's a freeing experience, because perfection, it's too heavy of a burden. When you try to project perfection, it's not doable. So when you present yourself as this is me, and realize that I was made, like you said, Chrissy, to need help. I was made to need assistance. I was made to depend on Jesus. Like, my inadequacy, it's not actually a flaw. That's the way I was designed.
Yeah.
You realize that and say, hey, I'm working towards better, but perfection is not attainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it also comes to just remembering that we are children of God, that we have a heavenly Father who loves us deeply, who wants us just to come before him, and he will wrap his arms around us and he will lift us up. And I think sometimes in ministry life, especially in the role of pastor's wife, and you are focused and sometimes on the ministry and keeping family together, keeping your husband and your marriage together. It's a lot going on. And if we don't take time to just be quiet and still before God and have a day of rest and to just let God fill us, it does get overwhelming. Yeah. And I believe we all get overwhelmed at times, but just continually being that child, that daughter of the Most High God, and having time just to be with him and rest. I would say, just spend time in solitude and go for a walk. Do what feeds your soul. Do that if you're overwhelmed in ministry. As a pastor's wife, if you love to paint, go paint. If you love to, run, go for a run, and just find time to do something that feeds your soul, because God made you uniquely and he wants you to be the person he created you to be. So thank you guys so much for sharing. Yeah. I feel like we could talk. We didn't even get about having family and having kids. We could talk more and more. But we're so glad that you shared your story and shared your experiences with us. And to you and to pastors' wives that are listening, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being faithful to the ministry that God has called you to be a pastor's wife and serving the local church and the kingdom of God at large. You are valuable and you are so needed in the kingdom. And we just want you to feel like you're treasured. If you would like prayer, I would love to pray for you. You can contact me at breatheministry.net. Or if you would like to join a pastor's connection group and get together with like-minded women, just contact me and I would love to connect you. You are valuable. You are worth having friendship and worth having support. I would also like to thank Vision New England for letting us have this opportunity to raise up awareness of the life of a pastor's wife. And I would like to thank Bob Atherton for being our producer. And I'd like to thank you, our listening guests. And if you would like to subscribe to our podcast, you can do that on Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, or the Google Podcast. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Chrissy and Sonia. We so appreciated your time with us. God bless you all. Bye-bye.